actually claimed that, in fact, the historic challenge, in other words, the challenge that has been around forever for leaders, is to be able to manage the crisis or a crisis while building the future. I think that sometimes we tend to feel that we're going through unusual times, and also that this has never occurred before. Obviously, there is a lot that is specific to now, but there is a lot of learning and wisdom that is available in terms of other leaders who've had to navigate not only their businesses, but their countries, and sometimes many countries, because those of you who know, Henry Kissinger was in fact a diplomat. So many of the times he was crossing borders and managing difficult situations. The graphic I've put up is around saying that one of the key principles is focusing on where you want to emerge and imagining that at the end of this journey. So I'm going to talk in detail about a couple of things, but before we get going, as I said to you, engagement is pretty important to me. So I want to start with a poll, and the poll is, please tell me, would you rather be Batman or Superman? So if you could just put your hand up in your comments if you want to be Batman. And I'm going to give you a few minutes so that Tracy and Laurie can kind of get a sense of what voting is taking place. And then on the second hand, would you rather be Superman? If everybody can just put their vote in, that would be really cool. So, Trace, what kind of picture is emerging?
So we definitely have more Supermen, 2 Batman, 4 Superman, another Batman. So it's three Batman and predominantly Superman.
Okay, cool. So the interesting thing, whilst they're both superheroes, only one of them has a superpower, or many superpowers, and that's Superman, both his strength and his ability to fly and many other things. Batman, on the other hand, tends to have to use his brain and levers, like his machinery, his mechanical wings, his Batmobile, to get things done, which, you know, Ellis was talking earlier about innate capability and to be an entrepreneur and whether it can be learned or not. And I guess these two iconic comic figures captivate that. So I'm not really going to spend too much time on it. That could be a webinar for another time. But very specifically, I would like to move into telling you about my views. The first thing I want to disclose, if it isn't clear, is that many of these are ideas that are not original to me, but they're ideas that I've adapted through my working career, my reading career, and my interests. And some of the ideas that I have, I believe in very strongly. And others, and those are the ones that I'm sharing. But there are other ideas, and a big part of what today is going to be about is what does it take to adopt some of these ideas and actually start getting the benefit, because I have experienced the benefit both personally and in my client base. So one of the promises was in my webinar, how do we emerge stronger from this challenge and this pandemic? And how do we take our businesses through a process which they can emerge stronger in? So to illustrate, I thought I'd tell you a story. Some of you may know it, the story of the egg, the coffee bean, and the carrot. So if we have a look, there is also the story of the frog. And many of you may know there's a kind of hyperbole discussion that goes, how do you boil a frog? And that is that you put him in sort of water that is comfortable and you slowly turn up the heat, and eventually from staying in that water he gets boiled alive. But I want to rather talk about what happens when you put an egg, a coffee bean, or a carrot into that scenario. So we're all in a bit of hot water, certainly with COVID-19 and in South Africa, and I think most of the people tuning in now are from South Africa. Everything was kind of taken away. All the natural market forces that we wrestle with and all the daily challenges were kind of swept away in the wake of this global pandemic and the rules that were imposed on businesses and people in order for us to survive as a society and in fact as a world. So we can imagine that we were all put into hot water. Now, the premise of what I'm going to talk through today is the choices we make. And those choices we make come from the way we think, the attitudes that we adopt, and the way that we decide to believe in things or not, and then that leads to behavior. So let's look at what happens with an egg. When you boil an egg, as you put it into boiling hot water, what happens to an egg is it gets harder and harder the longer you boil it in hot water. It doesn't change its shape. It is still an egg. It doesn't lose its identity, but it does in fact come out hard-boiled, which means that the inside has become as hard or even harder, in fact, than the outside. Also, if you cut into a boiled egg, there is a particularly, to me, foul smell that comes out of that. And so the more you boil an egg, the harder it gets on the inside, and in a way, it becomes quite smelly. The water itself stays the same. Let's look at a carrot. If you put a carrot into boiling hot water and you boil it and you continue to boil it like we did with the egg, what happens to the carrot is it started off hard and firm and fresh and juicy, and as you boil it away, it becomes softer and softer and mushier and mushier. It loses its identity. Ultimately, it loses its shape. It loses its flavor, its taste, its personality. And in fact, that taste seeps somewhat into the water, but largely evaporates. So if you put a carrot into boiling hot water and boil it away, it changes quite substantially, just like the egg. On the other hand, if you take a coffee bean and you put it into hot water and you boil it away like we have with the other two, what happens is the coffee bean retains its shape, retains its flavor, and in fact moves its flavor into the water. So when you take it out, the coffee bean is still a coffee bean, but in fact the water now has both a coffee aroma and in fact a coffee flavor. So the choice about getting stronger as a leader and as a human being and as a business is not about what happens to you, because it's really about the things you believe, who you are, and the choices you make. Do you want to be an egg? Get harder and tougher and more cynical? Do you want to be a carrot? Just melt down and lose all hope and sense of what you can do and how you can be in the world? Or do you want to be a coffee bean? Change the world around you for the better. So building strength is something that really does come down primarily to belief and to action. The next promise I made to talk about was how to get healthier. So in today's world, what does getting healthier mean? It doesn't only mean getting stronger in terms of physical strength. It doesn't necessarily mean getting stronger in terms of emotional strength, which would be resilience. It doesn't even mean only getting stronger in terms of spiritual belief and a sense of purpose and meaning. All of those things are true, but no one of them in itself defines healthiness. In fact, wholeness, where you have physical, emotional, and spiritual strength and healthiness, it defines healthiness. So the paradigm of how do we emerge healthier, I'm going to talk a lot about in terms of strategy and leadership. The last promise was about wiser. So how do we emerge wiser? The owl is often the iconic image of wisdom, which I'm not quite sure where that started. Maybe some of you can Google and let me know, or if you do know, let me know at some time. But what is the difference? You could say, is wisdom the same as being smart or having knowledge? And I would say that many of us would say, no, we consider a wise person somebody who does have knowledge, who is smart, and who has experience, but we really consider wisdom about conscious competence. In other words, a wise person can apply what they know and think and have done in their experience to the current situation in a way that makes things better, easier, more understandable, gives you a pathway forward. So they're quite demanding promises, and I'm not sure we'll get to all of them. This is more of a stimulating kind of a session rather than a teaching session. I'd like to unlock your ideas, get you to think a little about yourselves, and see if there's some things that really make sense to you that we can deepen on another occasion. So the first idea that links to wisdom, health, and strength is the idea of paradigms. So what is a paradigm? A paradigm is a model, a way of seeing the world. That's what it is. It's a belief system, an attitude, and a set of behaviors. And it can range from the most sophisticated to the most mundane. So for instance, I'm a mom, and my children and my husband will tell you that there are many things in life at the most mundane level that I have a paradigm paralysis problem with, whether it's how to pack the dishwasher, how to lock up the house at night. There's my way or the highway. And the minute I start believing that my way is the only way to do something, I'm suffering from paradigm paralysis. And that happens as much in business as it happens at a personal level. I've put 2 pictures up there to stimulate 2 other ideas, which are the paradigms I believe generally businesses are locked in. And those ideas are, when you're up to your you know what in crocodiles, there's no time for strategy and leadership. It's all about survival. Versus when you're sitting at some clean desk with a beautiful view in front of you, pondering the universe, that's the time for vision, that's the time for purpose, that's the time for strategy, and that's the time for leadership. So we have a paradigm paralysis where it's either or. And I think this robs us of our capacity to think and to do and to perform in different ways. Just to illustrate that, I want to tell you another story. The story is of culture. So how do we create culture? And I'm talking specifically about a business in this context. Well, it could equally be true in a family or in any context. So how do you create culture? So I'm saying, let me tell you a story. Start with a cage containing 5 monkeys. Then hang a banana on a string in the corner and put a set of stairs underneath the banana. Before long, a monkey will start to climb towards the banana. Of course, that's what we all want. As soon as he touches the stairs, not even the bananas, spray him and all the monkeys in that cage with ice cold water. Obviously, that monkey will run away. After a while, another monkey will try, do the same thing, spray all the monkeys with cold water. Pretty soon, when any monkey tries to climb the stairs, the other monkeys will prevent it. Now what you're going to do is remove one monkey from the cage and replace it with a new one. The new monkey sees the banana, wants to climb the stairs. To his horror, as he moves towards it, all the other monkeys attack him. After another attempt, he knows that if he tries to climb the stairs, he's going to be physically and emotionally assaulted. Now you remove another of the 5 monkeys and replace it with a new one. So you have 2 monkeys who were never there at the initiation of the exercise and 3 that were there from the beginning. The newcomer goes the stairs, equally so as above, is going to be attacked by all the monkeys, and quite viciously. The previous newcomer, who wasn't exposed to the first exercise and was attacked by the other monkeys, now takes part. And obviously, two of them that beat him have no idea why they were not permitted to climb the stairs or why they're participating in the beating of the newest monkey. So after you've replaced all 5 monkeys, both the 4th and the 5th, with the same, each time you put a new monkey into the cage, you will see the same scenario repeating. All the monkeys that have been sprayed with cold water have now been replaced. Nevertheless, no monkeys are ever going to approach the stairs again. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done around here. So we learn culture, we learn our thinking, we learn our paradigms from the people that we surround ourselves with. And that's why I believe leadership has got a key role to play in terms of creating a culture of thinking, of flexibility, of resilience, of inner strength, of learning, all of which are the underpinnings for business strength, health, and wisdom. So another new idea. The Janus effect. So January was named after the Roman god Janus, and he is the god of doors and time, meaning that he has 2 faces, not that he's two-faced, but rather that he can look in both directions at once. He both looks backwards as well as forward. That allows him to study the past while peering into the future, which is a great definition, if you like, of wisdom. And as I said to you, the historic issue here is that would go right back to the Roman times. So what are some of the paradoxes? So paradox, like looking forward and backwards at the same time, like the Janus effect. Here are some of the other paradigms that we've learned. Old and young. You're either old or you're young. You're either quick or slow. Something is either safe or dangerous. It's either about me or it's about my team. It's either acting in the short term or it's acting for the long term. It's either something is new or it's an old idea. Something's risky or it's guaranteed, etc., etc. You can read those paradoxes and you can probably find many for yourself as well and understand how we have been programmed, just like those monkeys, to adopt an attitude, a behavior, and a thought process that we don't really examine and we participate in quite vociferously and even argue and beat people up about that's not the way things are done or it's not possible to do both and. So I did in my last sort of webinar cover the idea of creative tension. Why am I introducing it here? Because like Janus, creative tension, as you can see in the picture there, is about both vision and current reality. Now, the truth about creative tension is it creates structural tension because there literally is a gap in terms of current thinking, current reality, current problems, and your desired future or your vision. So I also said creative tension can be understood for those of us who are more visual in terms of, or more kinetic, in terms of holding an elastic band between 2 points, where this one would be my current reality. And when I start thinking about a desired future, I move away from my current reality into that which I want to create. Now, this is a tense process for me. I'm constantly fighting this structural tension. And I have to make choices all the time. If I see the structural tension as creative tension, as opposed to stressful tension, creative tension meaning that I can use it to create something new. So then I tend to focus on what do I want to create. I tend to put my energy into creating, and I tend to have a generative orientation. If, on the other hand, I see this real structural tension, and there always is going to be a pull that is hard to maintain, as stressful tension, I tend to focus on what I don't want. I tend to be putting all my energy into problem solving, and therefore I have a reactive orientation. All my thinking, all my doing, all my planning is focused on taking away problems in my business. Now, I would suggest to you that you need neither one nor the other. You, in fact, you need both. Oopsie, I thought that Okay, so that's another idea that I wanted to introduce, the idea of both. You need to be able to focus on both the creative and the stressful tension. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, where I'm going to suggest that effectiveness is about the creative tension and efficiency is about the stressful tension in terms of the real world that we all live in. Okay, so if you are in the creative tension mode and you in fact have an idea of the future that you want to create and you want to build it, generally we would think about what are the critical steps, what is the route that we're going to take to get to that future. And that's a kind of thumbnail definition of strategy. Strategy is not about what you want to create, it's about how you're going to create it, what route you're going to take in order to get to your result. And that throws up quite an important thinking point. The thinking point about getting to your result is do you focus on the plan, the route that you've created, the strategy that you've created, or do you focus on the end result that you want? Most businesses that I've worked with, and as Tracy said, I have close to, I don't know, almost a 40-year or close to career in terms of consulting and coaching and doing organizational behavior interventions. And most of my experience is that during the part that we do business planning, that's like when we think we're sitting on the wall, like we saw before. The other times in our lives, what we do is we tend to focus on the here and now and solving problems. And whenever we want to evaluate how we're doing against building our future, in other words, the route, we look at the route, not the end. So we might say we had certain assumptions, we were going to do certain things, but then along came COVID and it took away all of those assumptions about our market, about our customers, about our capability, about the rules of engagement. It just decimated them. So now what is my choice? Do I give up because my plan, my route has been severely impeded? Or do I decide I still want to get there? What I need is a new strategy, a new plan, a new route. All too often I see, especially in big businesses or even in team businesses, people measure progress and measure themselves against the route. And when those assumptions get overturned, they abandon their strategy and feel that they can't go any further. So what I believe is that you have to both manage and lead. I have the scars on my back to prove it. I both run my own business, which is a family business, and I run a consulting business, and I obviously do consulting services. So I've had to earn my credibility by putting my walking my talk, as they say. I think there are two ways of focusing: efficiency, which is operational strengths and weaknesses, and managing them. If you look at the definition of efficiency, the things that you focus on are, you have a route map, that would be the little blocks, a path to your end result, your purpose, and you tend to maximize those issues and make sure that that pathway works very, very well, take problems out, and ensure that energy is used efficiently. That is, the amount of energy is equal to the amount of payoff that you get. Being effective on the other side can be illustrated in the same two-dimensional way by saying that your focus is not on managing the how to get there. It's really on managing the purpose and evaluating every step about the opportunities and threats and measuring it against your plan. The way to disaster is to split between the theory espoused and the theory in use. What I mean by that is that when we're doing vision, when we're doing planning, when we're thinking about our business at more of a conceptual level, we tend to imagine that it will be easy or difficult to get there. But that's a piece of work we do. We put it in a file, we put it in a drawer, we put it away. Then we get on with day to day. And often the things we espoused are not the way that the business is run. And this can become quite a dilemma, and certainly will affect your culture quite substantially, because people will respond, as we saw with the story, the monkeys and the cold spray, they will respond to what they experience, not what you want. So if you're spraying them with cold water because they are not being focused, not meeting their sales targets, and there's a lot of punishment for that, and you never talk about the bigger vision, then what will happen is people will consider that the business doesn't have a vision, even if you have one on the wall or in a document. So how do you navigate doing both, where you both have to focus on efficiency, the here and now, the strengths and weaknesses in the business, and the effectiveness, that is kind of your vision, leveraging opportunity? How do you do that? What do you use to navigate that? And find signals in the noise in your internal and your external world. So there are two kinds of things we use when we navigate. One is a roadmap and the other is a compass. How do you know which one is the right one to use for you? Like right now, as we are in this updated level 3, how do you navigate as a business, as a leader during this time? So if we just consider the two different paradigms we have here, when is it great to use a roadmap? And I know my husband's on here and he loves maps. So we're constantly using maps. The way you navigate, you find the signals or find your way with a roadmap, is that things are very well marked out. It shows you all the different paths. It shows you the cities. It shows you what you're going to encounter. I mean, this is not a city roadmap, but if you were in a city, it would give you every single road. It might even give you other details. So, for instance, you can get a map of, in a shopping center, where to find a shop out of a whole lot of shops in that center, how to direct yourself to where you want to go. The thing about a map is it does assume that somebody has been there before you. Somebody has actually laid out every landmark, or as many landmarks as they possibly can, and are able to establish so that you're walking a path that has definitely been walked before, that is known to others, and even if it's unknown to you, it's a path that you're navigating that exists. And what you use is you use the landmarks. Roads will be marked, towns will be marked, shops will be marked, etc., etc. You will need to pass familiar landmarks. The thing about crisis and evolution and emerging is often we're going into uncharted water where we know where we want to be, but we don't exactly have anyone who can map the territory in front of us so that we understand what we're going to encounter, what the landmarks will be, where we can take different forks in the road. We kind of are in a place of uncharted territory. When you're in uncharted territory, what you do need a map to the extent that you can get one, to the extent that you can look at where other people have been and how it's got them there, but you mostly need a compass. Because if you decide that where you want to be, for instance, is north, that would be your vision, the direction, you have to keep your compass, no matter where you find yourself. You may be facing the wrong ways at some times, you may move in the wrong directions at some times, but you always need to keep your eye on the direction, the end result. So a compass helps us really find signals in the noise, because if we don't focus not only on the territory around us, which is what a map gives us, but also on our ultimate goal, and keep that in mind, we are easily going to get lost. So a good leader uses both a compass and a roadmap, never favors the one over the other, and tries to keep both in sync, and both have their purpose at different stages. The biggest problem about a roadmap, and why so many people are reaching out to me and so many of the AutoJet businesses, is that we were counting on some of those landmarks, and when there is a landslide like COVID and a change in the laws and a change in life as we know it, some of those landmarks get buried. And when we get to that place, whatever we were expecting to find on that street corner is no longer there. So it's been swept away, and therefore we get lost very easily, even if we have got a roadmap. And that's kind of the work. Yes.
Elana, your reminder, it's 30 minutes in.
Thanks, Trace.
Pleasure.
Okay, so if we now move to a leader who is using both, how do leaders create commitment? Because most of the time you can't, whether you're even running your own business, you have to get your staff, your suppliers, your customers, your bankers, all your stakeholders behind you. If you are running a big business and you have a team, you have to build commitment to the direction as well as to the roadmap. And how do you create commitment? So I would suggest to you that commitment has to be beyond feelings, intentions. All too often when I get into businesses, most teams will say we're great at commitments, whether it's a management team, whether it's a board, we're great at commitment. And what that really means when I test it generally is that it's a feeling. It's a feeling like we all want the same thing. We intend to support each other. We intend to get where we're going. It's a very much of a rah-rah, a rallying cry. And whilst there is definitely need to have a rallying cry in your vision, in your culture, and even in your strategy, commitment has got nothing to do with the rallying cry. It's not a feeling or an intention. In fact, commitment requires clarity and buy-in, not to the idea, but to the forward actions or behaviors. In other words, how to make the next steps, the milestones, the direction, tangible and predictable is what commitment is about. So if I were to give an example, say we were saying we're committed to move our business to a virtual situation. If you're in the restaurant business, which is one of my businesses, you might say, we have to close down our restaurant and we have to open up an emporium, because what we want to do is we still want to retain all the values that our business had. We want to serve our community, but we need to adapt our way of delivery, not our end game. So then you sit down, and what you would need to do is you'd need to say, since we all want that, what can we expect to happen next? And look at all the different players in your team and ask them what actions they're about to take that will help bring that to fruition and align our ideas and support for those actions. So for instance, if somebody in the team says, well, I'm going to investigate who else is doing it, the rest of the team should consider it and decide, is that in fact commitment? That's just exploration. It's a bit like the top, yes or no, you're going to give us information. So then you could say, that's great. Investigating what others are doing is a great first step, but actually what commitment would look like is evaluate how we can adopt some of those practices and bring your personal recommendation for us to have a robust discussion about. That's what commitment would look like as a forward action. So here's a new idea. Many leaders that I work with and people that I discuss believe the problem about this idea is that it demands consensus. And in many businesses, you can't get consensus. I would tell you that all of the places I have worked in and have embedded this thinking have shown that team members can disagree and still commit, in other words, to the forward action that's expected of them, align that forward action, even where they disagree. As long as before they commit, they get an opportunity to engage in healthy discussion, to interrogate the ideas. In other words, commitment is the consequence of how you have got to the end goal that you want. It's not so much a feeling during the process of consensus. It's really about, as long as people feel listened to, they will be able to commit and implement a decision. So that's also a new idea that we've got. Okay, so now we understand some of the thinking, the paradigms that we've suffered from. It's not, if you're in crocodiles, you can't do strategy. It's not, you can only do strategy and ignore problems. It's not that problem solving has to come before strategy. It's not that the culture, our way of doing things doesn't allow it. All of these things can be learned and changed. It takes hard work, it takes deliberate effort, and cannot be taught, but they can be learned. So it's something I was discussing with Ellis a little earlier. I have a view that many of these personal changes in thinking and behavior come from us wrestling with our own conscious thinking, understanding why we are committed to doing things in a certain way, exploring if there is another way, but really exploring it. Once we adopt a view of where we want to go and we examine some ideas that will get us there, we have to build healthy habits to get us there. So I do certainly believe that we can learn things, but I think it's very hard to be taught. And I know that, you know, I experience this all the time in my own family, because I can, in fact, engage with people who pay me and they'll gladly wrestle with the ideas and themselves learn things. But if I try and teach, as I do as a mother or a leader in my own family or in my own businesses, I often encounter resistance to learning. So learning and teaching are not the same things. Okay, integrity. Why have I put it up there? So my definition of integrity is what I think, what I say, what I do, and what I feel are in a straight line. If I'm saying and doing one thing, but thinking and feeling another, I'm out of integrity with myself. And I believe that what is going on is people are a lot more tuned in than we give them credit for, and they can perceive, smell when we're out of integrity. So a lot of the American models of the kind of 70s, where there was all this rah and get everybody worked up, if people do not experience that in their day-to-day work or in their day-to-day engagement, they didn't trust it, because they could really smell when somebody was acting out of integrity. The issue for a business in terms of integrity is most of the time when I deal with leaders, they wrestle with these paradigms. Should we not underpromise and overdeliver? Otherwise we risk, and this is you'll recognize the paradox, otherwise we risk the problem of overpromising and underdelivering. And that's really a no-brainer, because no leader wants to overpromise and underdeliver. Similarly, I would suggest the integrity of every leader is on the line when they adopt a strategy of under-promising and over-delivering. What they're really trying to do is manage their behavior for effect, for positive effect, reward, or for effect that they don't risk themselves in terms of embarrassment. Whatever it is, I believe it is a decision about integrity. Both of those models are. There is a sweet spot. And for me, the sweet spot would quite simply be promise what you want to deliver, and actually hold yourself and everybody accountable for how you deliver it and what you do to deliver it, so that you keep it in a straight line and you keep the sweet spot in place. Because the minute we start measuring how we want to, how our confidence in others or ourselves affects things, we are really messing with, I think, our capacity to get to where we want to go. So that brings us to part 2, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the habits of thinking and being as a leader in order to inculcate health, strength, and wisdom in your business. And one of the key ideas that we're going to wrestle with, which is also a paradigm, is vulnerability. I think it's kind of counterintuitive in our culture. We kind of have learned this fake it till you make it, which, by the way, is totally acceptable in my definition of vulnerability. But I'm going to talk much more about that at the next workshop that we do, and part 2 of the workshop. So vulnerability, I believe, is very, very important because it leads to commitment in the following way. If I'm willing to be vulnerable, that is, take off and show people what's really going on for me. Take off my mask. And I don't mean this in the way that we all have to wear masks at the moment, but take off my need to defend myself. If I can really own up and say, I'm not sure, or even own up to the passionate parts, to say, I really don't want to move from this. It's so important to me. If we can start owning up and accepting our vulnerability with the people that we're partnering, I believe that builds credibility. I also believe that it allows people to feel safe so that they can also express themselves in a healthy way and in an open way. It encourages the lack of politics. Politics being, the classic definition of lack of vulnerability that I see around boardroom tables is the minute somebody comes up with a counter proposal or an idea, or what the advocator of an idea perceives as criticism, their immediate response is, if you think you can do this better, then you should do my job, or this is my area, you stay in your lane. Those are all examples of lack of vulnerability. And what that leads to is organizational politics and lack of commitment, because the things you talk about are never real. If people do disagree, they don't put it on the table. Therefore, you can never really get their commitment. Even if they agree, they don't necessarily have the courage to ask you to unpack your thinking, the assumptions, why you believe that, what you're basing it on, and to interrogate. They kind of glibly accept ideas, and then you're going to get into trouble during the implementation phase. So I certainly believe that vulnerability is critical. It builds credibility, it fosters healthy debate, it creates commitment. So the keys that I've talked about today have really focused on the wiser and stronger part of emerging from this crisis and carrying your lead, your organization and yourself to where you want to go, in a way that at each step of the way, you become wiser as a business, you know more, but you're also able to apply your experience to the current problems, and you become stronger. Not only physical strength, in other words, you can actually lift things and push against things and survive things. Not only emotional strength, the resilience that it takes to bounce back from difficult situations. Not only spiritual strength, which is the capacity to know and to believe and to behave in accordance with your beliefs to get the desired result. The key things I'd like you to take out is the idea about creative tension and the choices we have. Everybody says we've got to be realistic. I would suggest that being realistic is just another way of, in fact, dealing with creative tension so that you move your goal to ease up the tension. The minute there's tension, people feel you're not being realistic. I would suggest that you learn as a business to change your strategy or your plan, not your results. If you get people to commit to the results, the plan can change all the time, which makes you fitter and stronger as a business and allows you to learn and figure out what is happening in your environment, to refer to your plan, to refer to your compass, and to kind of be more flexible and more resilient as you move forward. It also, therefore, is going to improve predictability for results, because if you have vulnerability in your organization, you will in fact inculcate a culture where debate is open, where it's safe and healthy, where people can disagree and commit. And when they do commit, they commit to behavior so that there's total clarity about what the next output will be from each person. And that allows you to both boost commitment, feel better about each other, deliver better, and take accountability beyond an emotional response to things that you are going to create. Because my key message is that you create what your creation is learnt as per the monkeys, and then about how you currently behave and induct other people. So I'm really happy. How are we doing on time? We've got about 12 minutes, I think.
Yes, it's just after 1:45, so we can open up to questions if there are any.
I have unmuted everybody.
Are there any questions, or not only questions, are there any ideas or concerns or differences, of opinion? Really happy to have a provocative discussion, or it's a lot to digest, right?
Can you hear me, Elana?
I can hear someone. I'm not sure who's talking.
It's John Cransdorf. You know, what I like about your presentation is that it's not full of a lot of jargon. When you hear these kind of discussions, you know, you get a lot of fancy jargon, which quite honestly in practice is not really applicable. And you've actually tried to focus on people and their commitment and an integrity in this planning process. I've seen wonderful plans that have been drafted and actually achieve nothing at the end of the day because nobody really believes in it.
Absolutely, because there's a schism between...
Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And there's just so much jargon. And it's just unachievable. And if it fails, you brought in the emotional aspect as well, which people get committed to it. And you don't like the idea of being wrong. You've got to accept that you can have it wrong and you've got to change. And it's actually a route map which can change.
Absolutely. And that's a new agility that we really need in the year 2020, given that most of the roadmap assumptions are going to be overturned, even when we believe they can't be. And the gift for me of the pandemic is that it really helped me position in a practical way for my clients what the fact that we never know the future and change is the only constant, because the things that we all believed would never change, it was not possible to close down air traffic. It would not be possible to limit people to their homes. It would not be possible. All of those things are up in the wind. So thanks for that, John. I also am sure you're a mentor, and I just want to endorse what you said and say that the problem we have is
one thing that worries me about the current environment, and obviously the changes that will happen. But in organizations, you create a culture with young people being there. They come into the office every day and they get exposed to the meetings and how things are done. If you move to an online environment, they're not going to get that culture. Maybe there's another way of creating a culture.
There is.
But it's going to be a culture.
Sorry, John, the short answer definitely is that you have to, and that would be a great example about the route map versus the compass. Because if you've got a map, the map is that you expect people to come in, you'll have meetings, you'll have physical access to each other, you'll be able to induct them. Now what you need to say is we want a culture that we all actually understand and support and behave in line with. How do we create it? So you've got to throw the map out the window or the strategy out the window and generate a new strategy given the new worldview. So these are big topics. I don't know if there's, and I'd love to talk more to people. I don't know if there's anybody else who would like to voice either their own thoughts.
Sorry, Elana. Ellis here again.
Hello,
with regard to the map, I'm quite in favor of your suggestions there, but I just had one point. Sometimes the map is useful to see what the opposition are doing, and that is not necessarily your route, but to see where your route shouldn't be. So I believe some recognition of a map is important. The other thing I wanted to just mention is this idea of consensus with regard to how to invoke culture. I've had experience in two types of businesses. One being acquisitional, where it grows through acquiring other companies, and the obvious other one is where it's organic, where a company has grown within itself. And I found that when it's acquisitional, we find no consensus management. It's so my way or no way from the takeover point of view. But when it's been organic growth, there's been tremendous consensus management, and it's created a more stable platform. The third thing I just wanted to mention was on the overpromise. You find people don't understand what over-deliver is. They think it's sending a box of sweets or something, and people don't understand that it's the trust element where overpromise is important. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so just picking up on your points and also some of the points that John made, I hope I didn't suggest that you don't need any maps. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that if you're relying on a map that you've built either yourself, John, when you do strategy and you're trying to use, when the assumptions are overturned, your map becomes useless.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, if you're going to use your wisdom, your experience, or the experience of other people to recognize some paths in front of you rather than which path to follow, but rather use it as input, that's great. So both of those things are about agility in your mindset and your capacity to think about the future you want and how to create it and how to take people with you in a healthy way. And the most important way to be healthy is, I believe, to have the courage to be honest and to allow all views to be heard. Any other, and we can talk much more about it because I can see by some of the names and people on here that there are a lot of people. I can see some of my clients as well, and I would really love to welcome them. Thank you for making the time, Sydney and Happy, and they are in fact not even in South Africa, so really pleased to see those names and all the others. Sorry, just noticing names that are popping out to me. Okay, so I think as we kind of, are there any others? I can't really see chats or anything. Laurie or Tracy, is there any?
No, nothing has come through in the chat box, but we have notified everyone about the date of the second part of this webinar on the 8th of July at 11 a.m. and we'll be sending the link to everyone. So there are no comments that have come through in the chat box.
That's perfect. So I would like to ask those of you who would tune in, talk a little bit about commitment in the way that I spoke about it. In terms of, I do believe that you get the most, not just by what you listen to or what you look at or a book learning. You know, like you said, John, sometimes the reason we have so much jargon is people see an idea and they like it and they become the messenger instead of the message. So they want to go everywhere and tell everybody about it instead of first internalizing it and being able, like that coffee bean, to actually stay who they are and affect the people around them, to prove it by their own doing. But what I'd really like to do is to invite people who are going to kind of join us on the second webinar to do a few things. The first one is to really think about any key issues that or opinions that you've got, and mail me on those things and include Tracy and Laurie on that, so I can really hear your voices as well, including the dissenting ideas. And whilst I'm not going to debate with any one person, it will allow me to at least share my paradigms and my beliefs on things that people are sharing with me. So that's number one. Number two is to kind of think deeply about the real topic and what Henry Kissinger said. Can you actually manage a crisis and simultaneously build a future? I'm going to talk a lot about how you team, how you communicate, how you live vulnerability, how you do healthy conflict,